Welcome to Credit and Coffee. Today, I'm sharing a deeply personal story about how the pursuit of a perfect life in affluent suburbs became an unbearable burden, and why walking away was the only path to real freedom. The morning light always felt different through the tall, arched windows of our dining room, not quite warm, more like a polished gleam reflecting off the expensive, high-gloss surfaces, illuminating dust motes dancing in the sterile air, hinting at an emptiness I couldn't yet name. Our home in the affluent suburbs was everything society told me it should be. Sprawling, immaculate, a testament to a certain kind of success, a meticulously curated facade, a sanctuary built not for comfort but for show, each carefully chosen piece of furniture, from the imported Italian leather sofa to the abstract sculpture in the foyer screaming of accumulated wealth and an impeccable, if somewhat cold, taste. The air within those walls, despite its constant filtration and climate control, often felt thin, somehow lacking the vibrant oxygen of true life, leaving me with a faint, persistent sense of suffocation. Every surface shimmered with an unnatural cleanliness, reflecting a relentless effort to present an image of effortless perfection. But I knew the truth, the constant vigilance, the army of cleaners and landscapers and maintenance workers required to keep this intricate machine running, a machine designed to impress rather than to nurture. The scent of my wife's freshly brewed artisanal coffee, often a single-origin varietal sourced from a boutique roaster, mingled with the faint, ever-present aroma of designer cleaning products, a clean, sharp scent that always pricked at something inside me, a silent reminder of the constant effort required to maintain this particular illusion, a chemical purity that felt more like erasure than cleanliness, like scrubbing away any trace of genuine human presence. The weight of expectations settled on my shoulders with the first sip, a bitter aftertaste to the otherwise perfectly roasted beans, a premonition of the day's coming performance. My morning ritual was fixed, a quick scan of the financial news on my tablet, the cool glass beneath my fingertips a constant connection to the volatile markets, checking the stock market, observing the fluctuations in our investments, a ritualistic act of devotion to the god of numbers that governed our lives, each percentage point gain or loss feeling like a direct judgment on my worth, a personal affirmation or condemnation. My mind would race, calculating the latest income figures, comparing them against the relentless outflow for the immense mortgage, a beast that demanded constant feeding, the exorbitant property taxes that felt like a yearly punishment for prosperity, an arbitrary penalty for daring to live in a postcode deemed desirable, the private school tuition for our children that rose faster than inflation, consuming a terrifying portion of our earnings. The mandatory country club membership fees that bought us access to a shallow social circle and an endless array of networking obligations, where every handshake felt transactional, every smile a calculation. It was a golden cage, truly, beautiful and meticulously crafted, sparkling under the suburban sun, but a cage nonetheless, each polished bar a representation of another financial commitment, another expectation, another rung on the ladder I felt compelled to climb, my breath growing shallower with each step, the air in my lungs always feeling insufficient. I remember the subtle shift in my wife's expression one morning as I mentioned a slight dip in the market, a fleeting shadow across her usually composed face, a flicker of concern in her eyes quickly masked by a practiced smile as she talked about her plans for the day, a charity luncheon at a meticulously manicured estate where the conversations revolved around designer handbags and vacation homes, a fitting for some new designer clothes she absolutely needed for an upcoming event. Her voice light and airy, carefully deflecting any true financial conversation, as if discussing such mundane matters would tarnish the pristine image we worked so hard to maintain. That moment was a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the facade, a quiet confirmation of the growing chasm between us, a shared unspoken fear that we both acknowledged but refused to name. We rarely spoke about the true state of our finances, not deeply anyway, not the gnawing anxiety that kept me awake most nights, staring at the perfectly textured ceiling, counting the hours until dawn, the quiet hum of the high-efficiency air conditioner, the only sound in our cavernous bedroom, a sterile lullaby to my unrest. I would lie there, eyes wide open in the dark, the cool, crisp air from the vents doing little to soothe the burning in my chest, my thoughts a relentless churn of figures, projections, and worst-case scenarios, playing out every possible catastrophe, every potential misstep, every avenue of failure in the suffocating silence. The pressure was not just internal, it was a pervasive external force, a constant, unspoken expectation from the world around us. We had built this life together, chasing what we believed was the pinnacle of achievement, surrounded by neighbors whose perceived successes only intensified the pressure. Their gleaming luxury cars, often switched out for newer models every year, a dizzying parade of status symbols, their endless renovations that always seemed to outdo ours, each new extension or pool deck a silent challenge, their lavish vacations to exotic, Instagram-ready destinations, meticulously documented online. All contributing to a quiet, insidious professional jealousy, an unspoken competition that poisoned even casual friendships, turning every interaction into a subtle status display, a weigh-in of who had accumulated more, who had climbed higher. The weight of comparison was a suffocating blanket, pressing down on my chest, making every breath a conscious effort. The expectation to keep up appearances was a heavy cloak, suffocating, yet I clung to it, convinced that this was what happiness looked like, this perfect, ordered existence, this relentless pursuit of the next material acquisition, the next social milestone, believing that true contentment lay just beyond the next promotion, the next successful investment, the next luxury item. The truth was, the early days of our ascent had been exhilarating, fueled by a promising tech startup where my initial investments had yielded impressive returns. Seeing the graphs of our portfolio climb like a triumphant mountain range, an almost vertical line of success, and my income had soared, giving me a false sense of invincibility, a feeling that I was untouchable, that the rules of gravity simply didn't apply to me. I felt like a financial alchemist, confident in my risk management strategies, convinced I had cracked the code to enduring prosperity, that the universe was simply rewarding my intelligence and foresight, a hubris that, in hindsight, was a dangerous precursor to my downfall. I remembered standing on the balcony of our first real house, a much smaller place then, overlooking a verdant greenbelt, the air crisp and clean, the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine a sweet promise on the breeze, thinking we had made it, that everything was possible, that the future stretched out, bright and boundless, full of genuine, achievable dreams. That ambition, that hunger for more, that relentless drive to outperform, had driven us, pushing us into this larger, grander house, a 5-bedroom mansion that felt too big even when our 2 children were home, their small voices swallowed by the high ceilings, echoing with an emptiness that belied its immense size and expensive finishes, a hollow triumph. The decision to purchase it had been fueled by a combination of aspiration and fear, a need to prove something not just to our peers, but to ourselves, that we belonged, that we had earned our place among the elite. The closing documents, a thick stack of legal jargon and intimidating numbers, had seemed a small price to pay for the illusion of ultimate success, a mirage shimmering just out of reach. We were house poor, living month to month on the high wire of my executive's salary, each pay cycle a tightrope walk, one unexpected expense away from a precipice I dared not acknowledge, the thought of a sudden repair or a medical emergency sending a jolt of ice through my veins, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead, even in the artificially cooled air of my office. The mortgage was immense, a silent beast that demanded feeding every single month, consuming a disproportionate share of our budget, leaving little room for error or genuine enjoyment, turning every discretionary purchase into a moral dilemma. The pressure began to mount, a relentless crushing weight, as I saw our carefully constructed financial stability begin to show cracks, tiny at first, then widening, threatening to splinter apart. I started taking on more risky ventures, chasing the elusive passive income streams I'd read about in breathless online articles, the kind that promised effortless wealth with minimal effort, dabbling in speculative cryptocurrency investments, pouring money into volatile digital currencies that promised quick, exponential returns, watching the charts with a feverish intensity, my heart pounding with every fluctuation, putting money into a friend's seemingly brilliant but ultimately ill-fated startup. A venture pitched with such infectious optimism I couldn't resist, ignoring the small voice of caution that whispered about the perils of overextension, about the dangers of chasing ghosts, of betting everything on a flickering screen or a charismatic smile. It felt like I was constantly trying to outrun a shadow, the shadow of potential debt, of losing what we had worked so hard to achieve, of having to face the humiliation of stepping back from the life we had so carefully constructed, to admit defeat in a world that only celebrated victory. My executive role, which initially felt like a triumph, a recognition of my intelligence and hard work, slowly transformed into a pair of golden handcuffs, the high salary trapping me in a soul-crushing job I'd grown to despise, drained of passion, filled with endless meetings and corporate politics, each day a slow, grinding erosion of my spirit, leaving me hollowed out and utterly depleted. The moral compromises I found myself making, small at first, then larger, chipped away at my self-respect, leaving a hollow ache in my chest, a persistent whisper of shame that grew louder with each passing week. I remember staring at the flickering spreadsheet on my screen late into the night, the numbers blurring into an indecipherable code of despair, the weight of a secret financial fraud, a small but significant act of deception I'd committed to shore up a failing investment, pressing down on me, a physical burden, a burning coal in my stomach. It was a desperate move born of panic, fueled by the fear of losing everything, of disappointing my wife, of shattering the carefully constructed image of success, a moment of weakness that became a dark secret I carried alone, a poison festering within, corroding my integrity from the inside out, making me question who I truly was beneath the layers of ambition and pretense. The market had been volatile, an unpredictable monster, its mood swings dictating my own, and my friends' sure-thing stock picks had turned sour, leading to substantial losses, entire blocks of our savings evaporating with each market dip, like watching sand slip through my fingers, each grain a lost hope, a forgotten dream. I had taken his bad investment advice, trusting him implicitly, blinded by the promise of quick gains and the desire to quickly outpace our mounting expenses, only to see our capital evaporate into the ether, leaving behind only the bitter taste of regret and a profound sense of foolishness, of having been utterly, irrevocably naive. Then came the unexpected blow, a personal one that hit harder than any market downturn. My father, who had poured his life into the family business, a small manufacturing company he had inherited from his own father, a legacy of honest work and modest pride, called me one evening, his voice heavy with defeat, the usual cheerfulness replaced by a profound weariness, the sound of a spirit broken, telling me the business was in terminal decline, a casualty of changing markets and rising costs, unable to adapt, unable to compete with larger, more agile competitors, a quiet surrender. The small dividends I had relied on, an unacknowledged part of our monthly income, a quiet, dependable stream that I had subconsciously factored into our budget, vanished, adding another invisible strain to our already stretched budget, pushing us further into the precarious zone, turning a tightrope walk into a near-impossible balancing act over a chasm of financial ruin. I felt the weight of my parents' aging, knowing I would soon be part of the sandwich generation, responsible for their care while still trying to provide for my own family, the financial implications a terrifying prospect that haunted my waking hours and infiltrated my dreams, a future looming large and overwhelming. The quiet desperation of keeping up appearances in our affluent neighborhood became an all-consuming performance, a daily masquerade behind a flawless smile, a meticulously chosen outfit, and a carefully rehearsed anecdote about some recent success, however small or fabricated. I would smile at the neighbors during weekend gatherings, making polite conversation about the trivialities of suburban life, the latest school fundraiser, the new restaurant in town, all the while thinking about the new luxury car parked in their driveway, the exotic vacation they just returned from, the effortless ease with which they seem to acquire more, and the ever-present anxiety of inflation and rising costs eating away at our carefully constructed stability, making every penny count. Making every choice feel critical, a constant battle against the tide. Every grocery trip pushing a polished cart through brightly lit aisles filled with overpriced organic produce, the vibrant colors a cruel mockery of my internal gray landscape. Every bill that arrived, the stark white envelopes accumulating on the counter, each one a potential harbinger of doom, felt like a punch to the gut, a reminder of the relentless drain, the unstoppable bleeding of our resources. I started noticing the small details, the chill of morning air on the back patio where I used to feel expansive, gazing out at our manicured lawn, now just cold, a sharp bite that mirrored the cold dread in my stomach, a physical manifestation of my inner turmoil, the empty coffee cups on the kitchen counter, remnants of hurried, stressed mornings, left behind like discarded promises, each one a tiny monument to a lost moment of peace. The subtle changes in my wife's posture, a slight slump in her shoulders that wasn't there before, a new tension in her jaw, hinting at her own unspoken burdens, her own silent struggles, her own carefully hidden fears. Our perfectly curated lives were fraying at the edges, and I could feel the threads unraveling, piece by agonizing piece. One ordinary Tuesday, amidst a flurry of emails and a particularly tedious conference call, the kind where I merely nodded along, my mind already elsewhere, consumed by my financial tightrope walk, it happened. My boss called me into his office, a sterile, glass-walled room that always felt like an operating theater, its minimalist design amplifying every sound, every whisper of conversation, every nervous shift in my seat. He spoke in measured tones, his voice devoid of emotion, about corporate restructuring, about difficult decisions, about the current economic climate, buzzwords that meant only one thing, a pre-written script of corporate euphemisms. Layoff. The word hung in the air, heavy, cold, final, severing my connection to the life I had known, the identity I had carefully cultivated, the career that had defined me for so long, now dissolving into nothingness. The emotional toll was immediate and devastating, a sudden vacuum where my sense of purpose had been, a sickening drop into an unknown abyss. The golden handcuffs were shattered, leaving behind not freedom, but the jagged edges of what they had held, the painful realization that my worth had been inextricably linked to my position and income, that without them I was adrift without an anchor. The loss of my job, my identity, sent me into a spiral of despair, a freefall into an abyss of uncertainty, where every solid ground beneath me gave way. The secret debt I had accumulated from my failed cryptocurrency ventures, which had been a desperate attempt to recoup losses, and the hidden losses from that startup collapse, compounded by the small fraud I had committed in a moment of panic, now loomed like a monstrous shadow, threatening to engulf us, to expose my failures to the world, to tear down everything we had built. I had gambled, hoping to quickly recover our losses, to magically erase the growing deficit, but instead, I had accelerated our downward spiral, digging a hole so deep I feared we would never climb out, buried under the weight of my own poor choices and desperation. I remember the night I finally confessed everything to my wife. We were in the living room, the grand, imposing space suddenly feeling too large, too quiet, too full of unspoken resentments, the silence pressing down on us like a physical weight, suffocating in its intensity. The expensive abstract art on the walls, a vibrant splash of color I had once admired, now seemed to mock me with its vibrant, carefree strokes, a stark contrast to my internal gray landscape, my soul feeling as barren as a winter field. I laid it all out, the true extent of our debt, the failed investments that had bled us dry, the small fraud that gnawed at my conscience, a confession I had rehearsed 1,000 times in my head, each word tasting like ash in my mouth, the constant anxiety that had been gnawing at me for years, a confession that tasted like ash in my mouth. Her face, usually so composed, so perfectly maintained, a mask of suburban grace, crumbled, her eyes filling with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and a profound, heartbreaking sadness, a look that cut me deeper than any spoken word. The silence that followed was deafening, a physical presence in the room heavy and suffocating, punctuated only by my ragged breathing, the sound of my own despair echoing in the vast, empty space. The marital strain, which had been a low hum beneath the surface of our perfect life, a subtle discord I had tried to ignore, hoping it would simply fade away, now erupted into a raw, painful cacophony of accusations and tears, a torrent of suppressed emotions finally breaking free. The betrayal, not just of her trust, but of the life we had built together, of the future we had envisioned, of the very foundation of our partnership, hung heavy in the air, an invisible, toxic cloud choking us both. Divorce due to a financial crisis felt inevitable, a crushing consequence of my hidden burdens, the thought of lawyers and divided assets a cold, sterile horror, a further dismantling of what little remained. The thought of losing her, of dismantling our family, of shattering the lives of our children, was almost unbearable, a pain so sharp it made me gasp, a visceral ache that pierced through my chest. Bankruptcy became a real and terrifying possibility, the ultimate admission of failure, the final declaration that I had lost everything, a label that would follow me forever. I felt like I was drowning, utterly alone in a vast ocean of my own making, the silent scream I had suppressed for so long finally escaping, a raw, primal sound of despair that no one else could hear, a sound that tore at the very fabric of my being. In the weeks that followed, the veneer of our perfect life cracked and shattered completely, not with a bang, but with the slow, agonizing sound of falling shards, each piece a memory, a hope, a dream crashing to the ground. The process of dismantling our carefully constructed world was grueling, each decision a painful severance, each box packed a farewell to a false reality. We sold the house, the grand, expensive prison that had housed our gilded misery, the listing photos a cruel parody of the dreams we had once held, a stark reminder of the illusion we had chased, and moved into a smaller, older home across town, a place that felt more lived in, less pristine, more real, with scuffed floors and a faint, comforting scent of old wood and forgotten meals, a scent that somehow felt more authentic, more grounded, more human. The paint peeled slightly in one corner of the new kitchen, the floorboards creaked underfoot, and the garden was overgrown, but these imperfections felt like an invitation to life, not a flaw to be corrected. The shame was immense, a heavy cloak I wore everywhere, weighing down my shoulders, making me avoid eye contact with strangers, convinced they could see the word failure etched across my forehead. Neighbors who had once been so friendly, so eager to socialize, now offered polite, pitying glances or worse, averted their eyes entirely, their silence speaking volumes about their judgment, their relief that it wasn't them, that their golden cages remained intact, at least for now. My wife and I went through a period of intense struggle, anger, and grief, arguments erupting over trivial things, a misplaced dish, a forgotten chore, fueled by the deeper, unaddressed wounds, the raw nerve endings of betrayal and loss. But beneath the rubble of our collapsed financial dreams, something unexpected began to emerge. A quiet, fragile honesty, a raw vulnerability that had been absent for so long, a willingness to see each other not as symbols of success, but as flawed, hurting human beings. We had nothing left to hide, nothing left to prove to anyone, least of all ourselves, and in that utter nakedness, a new, tentative connection began to form. With the weight of the golden cage lifted, the air began to feel lighter, cleaner, as if I could finally breathe deeply for the first time in years, truly inhaling the scent of fresh air, not filtered by expensive HVAC systems, but raw and real. I took a job that paid significantly less, but one that allowed me to work with my hands, a craft I had always enjoyed but never pursued, deeming it beneath my executive status, something for people without ambition, for those who hadn't made it. It was a job crafting custom wooden furniture, the scent of sawdust and freshly planed oak a balm to my soul, a grounding aroma that spoke of tangible creation, the rhythmic rasp of the sandpaper against the grain a meditative sound, the tangible result at the end of each day a quiet satisfaction, a stark contrast to the abstract, often meaningless metrics of my previous career. Each piece of wood I shaped, each joint I fitted, each surface I smoothed, felt like a small act of redemption, a rebuilding of something solid and true, piece by careful piece. The paychecks were modest, a fraction of what I once earned, and we learned to budget meticulously, to make conscious choices about every single expense, to truly understand the value of a dollar, scrutinizing every line item, differentiating between needs and wants with a newfound clarity, a sobering but ultimately liberating exercise. Our grocery list became simpler, focusing on essentials, and I found a strange joy in the efficiency of it, in the absence of unnecessary indulgence. Our conversations became different, deeper, stripped of pretense and superficiality. We talked about real things, about what truly mattered, not about the next big purchase or the latest trend, but about our children's happiness, about our own well-being, about the simple comforts of home, about shared dreams that no longer revolved around material accumulation. We discovered small joys. A shared meal cooked simply at home, the aroma of garlic and herbs filling our cozy kitchen, a warmth that radiated from the stovetop and filled the entire small space with comfort, an evening walk through a local park, hand in hand, listening to the chirping crickets and the rustle of leaves underfoot, the laughter of our children playing in a yard that was smaller but felt more welcoming, more alive, filled with their joyful shouts, their uninhibited joy a stark contrast to the stifled quiet of our old grand lawn. We painted walls together, chose simple, sturdy furniture, and filled our smaller home with genuine laughter and the comfortable clutter of real life, each imperfection a part of its charm. There were still difficult days, moments of regret and lingering sadness, a gentle bittersweetness that reminded me of the life we had lost, the grand dreams that had turned to dust, acknowledging the pain but not allowing it to consume me. But I also found a profound sense of relief, a freedom I hadn't known existed, a quiet liberation from the endless chase, from the performance, from the fear of not being enough. The chill of the morning air no longer felt like a judgment, but simply the refreshing start to a new day, carrying the scent of dew-kissed grass and distant wood smoke, a promise of new beginnings. The empty coffee cups on the table were just that, empty cups, not symbols of a life teetering on the brink, but simply containers that had served their purpose, waiting to be refilled, just like me. I learned to find contentment in what I had, not in what I thought I needed to project, or what others expected me to possess, but in the quiet, steady rhythm of our days. I learned that true wealth wasn't measured in square footage or soaring stock portfolios, but in the quiet strength of my family, the integrity of my work, and the profound peace of an honest life, unburdened by secrets and the relentless pursuit of an illusion. I survived, and in surviving, I learned to truly live, unburdened by the silent screams of a gilded cage, finding a quiet, enduring happiness in the simple, authentic rhythm of each passing day, a deep, resonant calm that no amount of money could ever buy. What hidden burdens have you carried in the pursuit of a perceived, perfect life, and what moment finally gave you the courage to break free from the expectations of others? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today, a beacon in their own struggle. If this resonated with you, please give it a like, share it with a friend who might be feeling trapped, and subscribe for more stories of quiet courage and transformation. And tell me what small, everyday joy, however fleeting, brought a genuine smile to your face this week, reminding you of life's simple, authentic beauty.